The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by my fine co-host,
Laura Nash, ready to talk about medieval murder mysteries.
Laura, I knew this was going to be your game. Actually, you knew this was going to be your game, and
yes,
you convinced me to play it, and I'm so glad that you did.
I was basically like, hello, would anybody like to read my tract about medievalist literature? And our other co-host said, I'm kind of busy. So thank you for joining me. Pentiment looked like my jam. So often things look like my jam, and then they're not well-made games. I was thrilled that this is my jam and a good game.
Yeah, this was my jam in many ways. So just to set it up briefly, and then maybe we can backtrack a little bit and talk about like why we were so drawn to this. But the very quick pitch on Pentiment, if you haven't happened to have seen it, is that this is a sort of narrative adventure game. So 2D presentation. We'll talk about the art style in a minute, but oh boy. And it's a story about a series of murders in a small Bavarian alpine town in the 1500s. This is an abbey town, a town where there is, up on a high hill, there's a abbey full of monks with a scriptorium doing what monks do, praying and whatnot. And then, of course, there's a town that is related to and supports that. And you play as Andreas Mahler, not a monk. He is a sort of traveling artist who is working on his masterpiece, trying to become a master in his guild system or what have you, in Nuremberg. And he's come to the abbey to work. And that's the setup, is that a murder occurs and you become embroiled in the murder investigation.
Yes, and this is a game that's been praised for its art, its fonts, its oddity. I think I was really attracted because they said, let's be real, someone said the two inspirations for this game were Night in the Woods and Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose. And I said, well, that's weird as hell. Sign me up. That
sentence too, and every neuron in my brain lit up when I heard that phrase, that this was Name of the Rose meets Night in the Woods.
Yeah. It's like, don't even know what that is. Don't know what the balance is, but like, I have to try it. Like, I'm legally bound.
Have you read Name of the Rose?
I have read Name of the Rose.
Okay, so I read it too. I think I read it in college. Was just, when I was looking for something interesting.
Light reading, a doorstop.
It's actually great. It's a wonderful book. I don't know, if our listeners are out there and have not read Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It's like one of the greatest mystery novels of all time, but it's also way more than a mystery novel.
You fall into it. Like it's one of those books where the narrative does something odd to your brain and you kind of like lose yourself in the language, and the mystery is like a side part of it.
The way that I've explained it to people when I recommended the book to them before is that, like, if you liked Game of Thrones, and if what you liked about Game of Thrones was its incredibly well realized world with, deep, incredible backstory and like lots of details about the way that people live on a very like granular level, like just really interesting details about a world that is but slightly different than your own.
And maybe if you really liked college semiotics class.
Yes. Yeah. And like discussion of like interpretation of the Bible. But like that. But what if it was the real world? It's like the real world of in that case, I think it's like 1300s,
1320s. I don't remember.
Yeah, and I don't even remember where in the world it's set now, but
Italy-ish.
Yeah.
I remember nothing about the murder mystery. I remember the vibe.
Yeah. And it's been many years since I read it, but it's like it's this incredibly vivid window into the past in a way that really makes you think about like, well, the people in the past were just people, and they were living in this incredibly different, not just a different world in terms of like, well, they don't have cars back then, but like a different world in terms of like the mental space you inhabit when you live in a world where it is so like, life is short. Things like infant mortality are insanely high. The idea then that like our veil of tears, our life is just a transient place that we are between here and the side of God. And this, it's like, it's a strange world, but it was very real to these people. And it's a different headspace to put yourself into. And it's a really interesting story. And this is an incredible, it's not an adaptation of Name of the Rose, but it's almost as close as you can get. It's like, it's very similar in terms of it's a murder mystery. It's set in an abbey. It's set in the Middle Ages.
Much more straightforward for those who are hoping for, I mean, there's plenty of weird references, but it's not quite as weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as obtuse. There are many, many references, but
yeah, and it has we'll talk about this later, but it has an in-game glossary. So there's, the game feels free to throw, proper nouns that you may not be familiar with at you, but it will underline them and give you a star on them in the glossary that you can look them up in the menus. So,
and you don't have to look them up if you don't want to. Yeah,
very true. I only like kind of skimmed that every now and then. But yeah, the things that maybe we should set up the actual game. Well, what else is there to say about it before we dive into talking about the way that it plays and looks?
So one of my favorite things in gaming, yes, that's hyperbole, but it's true, is when people who don't normally play games completely lose their mind over games. And this has been an excellent version of that. And I think that's because this game has a really strong narrative structure. It's got the murder mystery. It's got a lot of curb appeal. Like I think this is
curb appeal is a good way to put it. It's like you can look at one frame of this game and be like, I've never seen a game that looked quite like that before.
It looks like a medieval manuscript, and you're either going to be down with that or you're going to be like, I'm allergic to this. Please get it away from me. Mm-hmm. I happen to think medieval manuscripts are absolutely hilarious and beautiful. My mom, when I was in maybe in third grade or fourth grade, brought me a planner from the Metropolitan Museum of Art that was books of hours illustrations. And I was like, everybody else had like Dora. I mean, it wasn't Dora, but because of the time period, but it was, cartoons. And I was rocking this like medieval manuscript planner from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I was in on the art style, but there's more than that. So I just want to try to like describe a little more of the vibe before we get into the story, because I think it's important to think about this game as like unclassifiable, but clearly full of hooks, because there's not a lot of games that you can just easily give to somebody who doesn't play a lot of games and they're fine. And this, I think, is one of them.
I think that's true. Yeah. Something that I wanted to, I heard a really good interview with the lead developer or director on this game. He went on Waypoint Radio and talked a little bit about how this game came about. And one of the things he was talking about, so we haven't mentioned, this is a game from a really big studio that's been around for ages called Obsidian Entertainment. And the lead designer on this, the developer, Josh Sawyer, is basically a lifer at Obsidian Entertainment. He was a designer on Icewind Dale, a famous RPG out of there that came out in the year 2000, and he has been there ever since. He was, for example, the director on Fallout New Vegas and all of its various DLCs. He was the director and lead designer on Pillars of Eternity and Pillars of Eternity 2. And that's like this is a really, really weird swerve for him. But he talked on the podcast that I listened to him on, and I would recommend going and listening to that episode of Waypoint Radio. It's been a few weeks now, about that. He was, he basically studied this stuff in college. It's like clear that like this was something like that was like a lifelong passion for him. He's been wanting to make this game in some form for many years. Previously, he had it, envisioned as an RPG, but it kind of shifted to being this. And this is obviously a really, really weird thing to come out of Obsidian. I guess, if you've been there forever and you've been the lead director on a ton of games, you can just sort of like get your passion project made at some point after you've put in, 20 some odd years in the trenches. But also, this was a game that was pitched almost immediately following Obsidian Entertainment's being acquired by Microsoft and Xbox Game Studios. And I think that's really, really interesting. I had, I've always been a little bit nervous since Game Pass became a thing. I've been a little nervous about what it meant for the industry. And like one great game coming out that's like a Game Pass exclusive and funded by Microsoft does not necessarily like set my mind at ease. But this does give me a little bit of hope for there being taste at Microsoft and in that whole studio machine, because Obsidian, famous developer of RPGs, gets acquired by Microsoft. They were clearly buying the Fallout New Vegas studio, right? That's who they were buying here. And the first thing, or practically the first thing that they pitch to Microsoft as like, this is the thing we're going to do next, is not an RPG. It is a small team. It is a 2D adventure mystery game set in the Middle Ages, just absolutely drenched in literary and biblical references,
historical, allegorical, symbolism, astrology.
Yeah, it's just
alchemy.
This is such a weird niche game. This is a game where if you described it to any publisher, they would run screaming from the room because it is unmarketable.
But if you put it with 100 other games and it looks cool, people might just download and try it. So I'm like, yes, this is good. This actually it's
great. This is a clear win for the gaming public that this thing got made. And Josh Sawyer said this would never have been made without Game Pass. And so this is something that he would never even have pitched it without Game Pass. The knowledge that this was a game that they would know they would get a certain amount of money for, so they could say like, we're going to scope with this size of team and this set of features, and we're going to get basically a fat payout from Microsoft.
It opens like a Game Pass game in that it opens with a weird dream sequence in the artist's mind with like Prester John and a weird the saint of curse language, Saint Grobane. Like it's not a real saint. Like a weird fool.
Well, it's not, because I don't know saints. I was like, that sounds like a real saint.
It's like the saint of vulgarity, and I think it was made up in medieval times. Like that little man shows up in a lot of manuscripts, and like an actual saint. And there's just these people, and Beatrice is on a balcony, and it's weird. And then there's a bunch of people falling on a ship, and this odd dream sequence starts the game off. So you're like, okay, I'm in with this weird medieval stuff, and then it wakes up in the bed and you're in a house. And I was like, this is how you start a Game Pass game. You tell people there's going to be weirdness, but there's also going to be normal stuff. It's such a good it's a Netflixy opening where someone could hop to the next movie any second.
Yeah,
that's what the beginning feels like.
It definitely has that. And it, we've already talked about the art, but like I do have to just reemphasize like how incredibly gorgeous this is. It's pulling both from medieval illustrated manuscripts and also from like woodcut block printing style illustrations of the time.
Yeah. Hannah Kennedy led the art style, so I want to give props to that. And also like drawing from a lot of different medieval drawings, like different styles. Like there's Germanic stuff, there's stuff from Italian, there is at some point they show an Ethiopian Bible if you do a certain thing, and it's absolutely beautiful. There's just a lot of references. There's marginalia, which are all the weird animals sitting around.
Love that. Yeah, so at any point you can pause the game. And so, we'll talk a little bit more about the plot and how it works, but obviously a big part of this is sort of investigating a murder. And you do have a kind of a loose quest log that's done almost sort of in the style of like a handwritten journal.
I mean, you're an artist. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And at any point you can pause the game and it kind of zooms out into a view where the window that you were playing is like an illustration in this larger book. And you can then turn the pages of the book and see your kind of quest log, which is very physical. It's a book with little tabs in it and handwritten notes that are that are date stamped. So you can see, like a little like log of what you've been up to and what what you have that you could potentially do next. And also there's illustrated maps in there, but also you can flip over to a glossary or a listing of all of the people that you've met with illustrations of their faces and some notes about who they are. All of this super, super helpful because this is a game with a really large cast. It takes place across 25 years, huge span of time and it's done in acts. So there's sort of time skips, but between like the first act and the second, I think there's like 7 or 9 years or something like that. So having this incredibly great like book style menu interface where you can not just go and see like a quest log, like an RPG, but really like a journal that will recap for you what you were doing and thinking, notes about every character, and then the incredible glossary that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words that are used in the game defined. It's so great and it's so fun to flip through it.
This game has a lot of text in it. It's a very narrative heavy game, but what I found super interesting is I think this game, sorry for people who love voice acting, I think this game would have been really painful had it been voice acted.
There's a lot of text.
There's a lot of text. And I think what it was really smart about is because it's the main character, you're playing a character who is an artist and a person who makes books, writes and script. Everyone who talks to you has one of a certain, like their dialect, their demeanor, their attitude is communicated by the way the letters are animated on screen. Some are in a very like gothic high font. Some people speak very deliberately and you see the outlines of the words and they get filled in. Other people speak very quickly and the words show up quickly and there's a lot of typos basically that get erased and redrawn. Every time someone refers to God or Jesus Christ, it's in red, like the old-timey Bibles.
And you see it drawn in last. So like they'll write out the sentence, but leave out the word Lord or God or Jesus, and then goes back afterwards with red ink to write those words in.
Which is hilarious when the characters who don't really believe in God are cussing about God, and like it gets drawn in afterwards. It's just like a icing on the punctuation.
So I wanted to say that like I usually hate timed text in almost every context.
I did turn the speed up.
I turned the speed all the way up to the max and it was still not fast enough for me. I'm not a huge fan of timed text in general. They were doing it for a very good reason here, but like, ask anybody in the interactive fiction scene, timed text is like a widely unpopular thing. And I think it bothers a lot of people, fast readers especially. And I'm not, I'm no like, robot or scanning machine or anything, but like I'm a pretty fast reader. And so even the fastest setting for the the text here was a little too slow for me, but I think it was worth it here because they were doing a lot of their conveying of character with
personality.
Yeah. Like personality with text styling. Laura mentioned that Andreas Mahler, our lead character, he starts as a young artist trying to prove himself. He's dropped out of medical school.
Well, depending on...
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
Depending on your answers, he's dropped out of school.
That's true. I forgot. He dropped out of something and decided to become an artist. He writes in what the designer described as a humanist script, which I'm not a historical typeface nerd enough to describe what that means exactly, but like it's a very readable sort of print type of script, type of writing. He's not like doing a lot of fancy loops or anything.
It's a kind of handwritten secular. It's a secular style of writing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So that's how he writes. But other characters write very differently. So like the more religious characters write in fancier, more like illustrated manuscript looking writing. The like peasant characters write or speak in more handwritten, kind of scratchy, and different characters have different error rates. So sometimes as you're speaking, you will see like typos essentially appear in people's speaking, and then they'll get scratched or sort of erased out and rewritten. And according to the designer, like each character has like an error rate that's based on it's like a characteristic of their character. So like some of the characters that are like either sloppier speakers or are less well educated will have more errors in their speaking.
And there's the family. It took me a while to realize it was the printer family that their text appears upside down in like block letters and then flips over, like as if they're speaking. And when
they speak, they rather than as people speak, you hear the sound of like a quill on parchment, but it sounds like a printing press going ka-chunk every time they speak. I was always glad when they were on screen because their text wasn't slow.
Oh no, their text goes pretty fast because which makes sense. You have to wait for the person to write, which is part of the plot. I think
the Druckers, they're great. So I really liked that text effect, and it's clearly like something they put a lot of effort and thought into. Like there were constantly little ways that they would tweak it too. Like a new character would come in, maybe like a character who speaks Italian, for example, and depending on whether your character speaks Italian, either you just see their handwritten Italian or writes out the Italian, then rubs it out and rewrites English in a smaller font in between the kind of half erased Italian lines, that kind of thing.
My favorite moment of text was when you're talking to like a shepherd, Till, and you are having, if you engage in conversation, you learn that Till is able to read and has read most of the books at the Abbey. And as he's telling the story about how educated the typeface changes to a more elegant font, like as if as Till is talking about his academia, the word, like he's dropping the peasantness from the voice and you can't unhear it. Like you could hear the scholar this man could be, and the text updates. So I love a living text. And I think I also was like, I would love it just like 25% faster, but I know. But I don't think I would have noticed all of the bits had I been speeding up. I don't think I would have clocked all these little personality quirks. So I get it. It made me slow down. It was probably good for me that it did so.
Yeah, I still would have liked it faster, but I get it.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of little sliders in the menus, like the text speed slider, I don't know where else to put this in the episode, but I wanted to call out, this has the most incredible settings slider that I have ever seen almost ever. Laura, did you mess with the head size slider?
I saw that it offered something called a big head mode, and then I was like, no, moving on.
90s kids will appreciate a big head mode. Back in the day, all the good games had a big head mode. Usually you'd enter a cheat code, and then, your basketball players would all have gigantic bobbleheads or whatever. I remember this being in, I'm pretty sure, like the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, and like there were a lot of games back then that had a big head mode. It was kind of a thing. And now it's kind of just like a jokey thing that some game developers will include. Here, they don't have a big head mode cheat code. They have a head size slider in the menus with 6 stops on it between normal size and huge.
And what did you choose?
Actually, I ended up using kind of the middle, because what's incredible about this is like, this is a game where, you've got big scenes, characters. I actually adjusted it up and down occasionally, and I didn't play the whole game with it turned on, but significant chunks of the game I played it turned on. I'll talk about like the ways I play this game later, because this is the first game that I played a significant chunk of, like most of this game, using Xbox's game streaming, cloud streaming service. So I was playing on a variety of different screen sizes, and when I was playing this game on smaller screens, the heads on these illustrated characters are quite small. And they do a lot of work on the expressions, like especially the major characters will have a lot of different expressions, and they're all very nicely illustrated. And so I turned that big head mode slider up to about 50%, and they didn't look totally unnatural, but the heads were bigger, and I could see their expressions better.
If I wasn't playing on the projector, like I would need that, yes.
But the funniest
because I got so much out of it.
The funniest thing about the head mode slider, it also applies to every animal in the game. So,
oh my gosh!
All the pigs and ducks and rabbits,
the cats and the dogs you pet have giant heads. Oh my gosh!
Have giant heads. It was so funny.
Oh my god! It's like the there was a hairpin series of like two medieval monks trying to illustrate things I've never seen, and they were just like, "That's a lion, right?" It's like, "Yep, sure." You know, and it's like a mouse with a fur hat on. Go for it! Like, yeah.
The pigs in this are hysterical looking. It's like,
oh my god,
yeah, like medieval illustrators would know what a pig looked like. But let's be honest, pigs are hard to draw, and the pigs in this are hysterical looking. And when you give them big heads, they're even funnier. So the big head mode slider, like, big props from me. I don't know what an implementation nightmare it was to make every head in the game increase in size. But like, even at about 50% size, like, they still mostly fit on their heads. There was a warning in the menu that said, like, things may not look right if you use the big head mode slider. Mostly they looked fine. Occasionally people's heads would overlap on things. Whatever. It looked great. I loved it. So let's see. Should we talk a little more? We're going to be careful about spoilers because this is a game about a mystery or series of mysteries.
Yes, we've been talking about everything but the plot of this game, other than saying we liked it, because
so good.
It's hard to. It's very hard to talk about narrative games without spoiling them. Mm-hmm. I will say though, City known for RPGs, these have a lot of interesting choices at the beginning of the game that affect your character in ways I was not expecting. I think that's safe to talk about.
Yeah, the sort of like choice and dialogue system, and that's quite neat.
Yeah, so you start off, and early on in a conversation, you get to choose basic kind of core attributes. Like, are you a hedonist, craftsman, bookworm, rapscallion businessman? You get to choose. You left university, but what were you studying there, and what was your secondary specialty? Yeah,
I have I have a screenshot of one of those choices where you can choose between Latinist, logician, orator, occultist, and heavens and earth. And I don't remember what all of the different options specifically address, but like, I think I ended up choosing orator, which all of these options basically give you little extra dialogue choices. Orator gave me, like, you know, I don't know, special, extra convincing, or sometimes extra convincing, like, you know, impassioned speech type of dialogue options. I would have liked to have chosen occultist. I just thought that would.
I think I kind of assumed you'd pick occultist, so I picked logician, and I also had a medicinal background. A nature lover, botanist, plants, which I don't know if this was true for you, but as I wandered through every plant I saw, I would be like, that is this plant, and it is interesting that it grows here. Like, I
got a lot of that too. I think it was I'm not sure if all of that was the medicine background, but
yeah.
I liked this system. What I think is particularly cool about it, though, is that while choosing those options does open up additional dialogue choices, I don't think it really locks you out of anything.
You're not forced to choose them at any point. So I had a hedonist background, but I could choose when to flirt and be a weirdo creep, including when I wondered, did you stumble across the two village women in the waterfall naked?
No, dang.
So I don't know why, but on the last day I was trying to investigate the murder, and I was supposed to be eating lunch, and I was like running around doing all these errands instead.
Yeah, I think I didn't even like find my way to the waterfall until Act 2. So
I went all the way down to the waterfall, and two of the daughters of the town were bathing naked in the waterfall. And because I was a hedonist, I could have been a super creep to them, but you can choose not to. So I said like something flirty, and then they said, "Don't be a creep." And then I was like, "No, it's okay. I'll avert my eyes. So let you get out of the water." Put your clothes on. And then I next saw them at the Abbey for the murder mystery reveal, and I was like, you two, I know what you've been doing literally 10 minutes ago.
Well, a lot of the like little bits of this game that I loved are like moments like that, where you're seeing the, like, you know, like you're seeing people who have like this like religious life or who live these like hard scrabble lives of toil, but like you get to see them like how did medieval people have fun? How did they have sex? How did they flirt? All, they're real people and living real lives despite living in a world that is like conceptually different than the one that we live in. It's, I don't know. I thought it was really cool. There were other things in the like discovering people's secrets and things that were quite fun.
Yeah, and that felt very Night in the Woods, right? I just happened, like, there was no reason in the script for me to go down there. I was just getting desperate to find some extra something before time ran out, and I was wandering around every place I hadn't been. That's a very Night in the Woods feel to me.
Speaking of the like running out of time, that's the other thing about this that also is very Night in the Woods. There's other games that have, I don't know why, but I'm constantly reminded of the Persona games with this, in that like this, the mystery solving is all based on sort of a clock. So, something goes down, like a murder happens, and you have a certain deadline for when you have to figure out what's going on. So maybe you have like 3 days, and each day is broken up into different chunks. So there's like a morning. So it has the
canonical hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is nice because you're making a book of hours. Like that is your masterpiece. So it's nice that your day is a book of hours, basically, but in a circle.
Yeah, it's
a
nice,
big wheel.
It's beautiful, like illustrated kind of clock type of thing, and with the monastic hours, and so it's telling time in that very old fashioned kind of way, but it also really helps that like it's using that as a mechanic. So you have the morning working hours, and that means you can go out and talk to people, but generally there will be some big thing that you can choose to do that's going to advance the clock. So like you can go and talk to everybody in town, but you might have 3 or 4 different people who say like, "Hey, yeah, let's go have a beer together, or let's go hunt together, or you can come help me around the house." And those are different things that you can do that will advance the clock and kind of end that phase of the game. But each of them, you're kind of choosing between them to see which of them is going to give you the lead that you need to continue your investigation.
And that's something I wish I knew before I started playing, because I think it's actually fine. I don't regret it. But earlier in the game, I could have spent more time. I didn't realize that once I, ate lunch, that the lunch hour would end. I didn't realize I could also talk to people during lunch and just hang out for a while before I ate. They warn you a couple times, like you're doing something at night and it's going to mess up your sleep schedule. But I wish I had known that you can do a fair amount of talking, and it will be clear if you're going to be doing a long assignment or not.
Yeah, so I believe Night in the Woods had the same thing. I know that like the Persona games have a similar kind of approach, and lots of other games I think do this. But it works well here. But it does kind of like it hints at you, but it's not like putting up UI in your face. So the characters will say something like, "Do you want to do this? It's going to take a while." And you're just meant to understand, like when they say it's going to take a while, that means that by the time that this scene that I'm prompting to begin, by the time that scene is over, Compline, or whatever the name of the particular monastic hour you're in, is going to be over, and you're going to be moving on either to bedtime or whatever. I had some similar trouble to you, Laura, in that like I didn't quite grok that early on.
Yeah,
I'd say like the first half of the first act, and I probably missed some stuff because of it. And I will say that I was an absolute dog shit investigator for the first.
I really want to compare investigations with you because I do too.
But yeah, like absolute dog shit. Like one of the things
I didn't even investigate one person because I didn't want to accuse them, so I learned nothing about them.
Me too. One of the things about this is that like this game does not, I don't think this is a spoiler to say, and it's also in the first paragraph of the Wikipedia. So if it's a spoiler, it's a spoiler. This is a game that does not reveal to you canonically who the murderer was in any of these given murders. You have a choice between a number of likely candidates, but it's not like you can do DNA tests on evidence here because it's 1530 or something. You have to kind of decide either based on the evidence that you uncover and what seems likeliest to you, or based on just who you think is most worthy of being punished. Because there will, in every case, so I believe in every case, there's multiple people that are potentially the criminal, the murderer. I'm not sure the game has an opinion about which of them is the one to go with. Like, I think it's kind of just like, you can pick yours, right? Mm-hmm. There is sort of a background conspiracy going on across all of this. So the game does have sort of an overarching narrative and overarching mystery to it. But in each of the specific murders, you get to sort of decide, well, do I want to accuse the young nun? There's some good evidence that she did it. She has a bloody shovel, for example. But do I really want to accuse her because, she seems nice? Like that kind of thing. Versus like, well, I have a little less evidence against the Miller, but he's an asshole, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really nice blend of knowing a person is bad and also that they're good for you. Like, I really like the moral ambiguity of this game where you can... So. I mean, people have hard lives. People hate the church and their taxes, and people have strong feelings, and you're like, yeah, everyone's right. What a game. Everybody's right. Well, not everybody. The Baron is pretty terrible and kind of deserved to get got. But didn't deserve to get got in a way that your friend takes the fall, which is why I don't consider that a spoiler, but that's why you're incentivized. Let's actually talk about the
setup. Yeah, so the beginning of the game we mentioned, you're playing as Andreas Mahler. He is a journeyman artist who is working on his masterpiece in order to become a master in his guild. And he's come to Kirsau Abbey, the abbey in Tansing, this alpine town, one of the last remaining monastic scriptorium in Bavaria, because even by this time, printing presses have become a thing, and monastic scriptoriums where monks copy out beautifully hand illustrated, religious texts and other books. That's out of fashion in the extreme. But he's come to this place because he wants a nice quiet place to work. He wants to work alongside these talented monks who still make these beautiful books. And he's been there for a while. He's working on his masterpiece. And into town comes a lord, the Baron Rothvogel. Is Baron right? I think Baron Rothvogel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Redford.
and he seems like kind of a jerk at first, and maybe also at second and third. He's interested in you because he's a patron of the arts, and he's come actually to check on a commission that he made for an illustrated manuscript, one that is behind schedule, but he's also got a lot of offensive ideas. He's interested in Lutheran ideology, which is fairly new at this point. Starts talking about the articles of Martin Luther with the Catholic priests and everything, sure to be popular. And after he's kind of made an ass of himself at a big dinner, he's murdered. The specifics of the murder don't add up. An elderly priest, Brother Piero, your closest friend in the abbey, and sort of father figure to you, is discovered next to the body holding a knife, and claims, and it's very likely that he's not the killer because he's an arthritic old man with no reason to kill the Baron. He just says he came in and picked up the knife. He's not the murderer.
He's just so nice. He's a nice man. He's
the nicest guy. But you get involved because you want to save your friend's life because he's he's being accused of the murder. It's expedient for them to try to have to, they need to find a scapegoat for this lord's murder, or before the lord of the region comes and shuts down the abbey and scriptorium, because he's itching for an excuse to do so, and the murder of a noble would be just such an excuse. So they've got all this incentive to find the murderer quickly, and even if that means accusing Brother Piero of a crime he didn't commit. And you love your buddy, and you want him to not get beheaded. And so you are investigating that murder by talking to everybody in town and trying to find out who might have had reason to kill the Baron. And turns out almost everybody.
So many people have reasons to kill the Baron, including people you can't accuse. And I was like, this person has every right to kill the Baron, but they're not on a list of 5 people.
Mm-hmm. So that's the setup for the initial murder. The investigation has that sort of format that we talked about, the sort of day-night cycle and going and talking to people.
Before the murder, did you get the I'm a special boy pen from the Baron?
What do you mean?
So if you've managed to convince the Baron, like get the Baron's favor, like you can talk to his his horsemen guard, and they will give you a pin, like a special pin. Then I made the mistake of like, I got it and I had choice of like, I'm going to put it on right now. And I said, I'm going to put it on my nicest cloak at home. And then I put it in my pocket. And then I like could find no way for love or money. Like once he died, I really wanted to put that thing on my chest and walk around being like, I'm investigating this man's murder. And then I found out like everything bad he did. And I was like, I'm really glad I stuck that in my pocket. Never wore it. I got his favor, but never used it.
I think I kind of pissed him off. I forget exactly when, but like he's kind of an odious dude. You learn a lot about his history and so on.
Before that,
yeah,
he wanted to talk to me about trees and butterflies, and I was happy about it. And then everyone was like, "That man beat people to death," and I was like, "Oh."
Yeah, in the very first scene, when you first meet the Baron, he's making an effort to befriend you, and he wants to talk to you about the things that you're interested in. He's the one that you're talking to and is quizzing you about your backstory, where, the scene when you get to make your choices about like, well, where did I go to, what did I study in college and that kind of thing. And he's very interested in you. And also that's another like place where it does that like text shift thing, mid conversation when Andreas realizes that the Baron is an educated man. That's when it switches the Baron's text styling from, I believe it's from the sort of stylized like lordly script to the same humanist script that Andreas speaks in.
Yes.
So it pretty cool. And I thought this was a great hook. Like this mystery, I was all in. I was ready to investigate it. There's also an angle of there is a kind of conspiracy or something going on in the town of Tansing, that Andreas refers to as the thread puller. Someone manipulated the Baron into being in the place where he got murdered. Who, we don't know, but they've been leaving mysterious notes in mysteriously colorful inks and written in an extremely ornate and difficult to accomplish book hand, special handwriting, that he
does
can't
not
match to
fit anybody at the Abbey. Yes.
Right. So where is that coming from? And that's the sort of longitudinal mystery that you're kind of investigating across the entire game, even after you discover or just assign a person.
And this is where I think we'll talk about this if we do spoilers, but I definitely had a theory about this and like ran over to confront the person and they just were like, hello. It's like, oh, okay. The game does not want me doing this right now. The game is like, focus on one mystery at a time, Laura. There's too many things going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I kept expecting as well that like this like mystery, especially during the first act, I was expecting that the mystery of the like, who is the person writing these mysterious notes? I thought like, okay, I'll figure that out along with like, that's clearly the murderer, right? I'll figure that out along with the murder, and you don't. And that actually threw me off pretty significantly because like I kept pulling at random threads during the investigation of the first murderer, thinking like trying to like broaden my neck. So like it can't be this person.
So you thought this was a failure of investigation rather than a narrative plot point in the game?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that like there's certain people that are that are, the clear suspects. But none of them seem like the person who would be writing these ornate notes.
Mm-hmm.
And so early on in the first investigation, I was ruling out people mentally that shouldn't have been ruled out because they were clear suspects. And I was like, so I ended up not going very deep on any of the different like plot threads and kind of having to like guess. I don't remember if it was, I think at the end I ended up with like only one or two people that I could potentially choose from. And I had really slim evidence against any of them.
I can't wait to talk about this because I think I fully investigated 3 people and just ignored the 4th entirely.
Okay. Yeah. So I part of it was wasted time and so on. I kind of understood things a little better the farther I got into the game. But in that first murder, like I said, shitty investigator. I just absolute crap at it.
I think I was lucky that the backgrounds I had chosen helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll do a little spoiler break towards the end. I will also, just for the purpose of the spoiler break, say that like at this point, I am very near the end of the game, but I have not actually finished it. It's kind of like 3 main acts. Yeah. I'm getting close to the end of Act 3, but I've fully investigated the first 2 murders and haven't 100% completed. I'm like near the end of the 3rd act.
And I am in the middle of the 2nd act. That doesn't stop me from firmly believing I know who the thread pillar is, but I have no evidence because I'm in the middle of Act 2 and it's twisty. Yeah. So I am going to finish it. I just was quite sick this week. And as funny as it would be to try to play this game with a fever, like that sounds like a terrible time. So glad I didn't do that.
It definitely required some focus, so I'll say that. Before we do go to spoiler break, because I know we're going to want to, I did want to take a quick second and talk about like the ways that I played this. I kind of referenced this earlier, but like this was kind of a new thing for me. So I've had a Gamepass subscription for a while, but only for the gaming PC. But I have the Gamepass Ultimate subscription because I did the thing where you can, buy a bunch of Xbox Gold credit and convert it. So I've got like a 3-year Game Pass credit that is just like, super discounted. By the way, you can still do that. Still really good idea. But it was recently, there were a bunch of discounts on the Xbox One S, and I thought, well, why not? So I grabbed one of those and I started playing this on that, and that was great. But then I that was in my upstairs TV. I wanted to play it downstairs, so I played it on the game streaming thing. I'd tried that before with Tunic, and Tunic is like the worst case scenario for Xbox's game streaming. So I'd kind of written it off. Tunic has all of these like visual effects that were just absolute nightmares. Things like the blur and like tilt shifting and stuff were like an absolute nightmare for whatever video compression algorithm Xbox does for their game streaming. Everything looked absolutely smeary and weird and kind of just unreadable. And also it's like a Souls-like type of thing. You have to be like doing extra precise dodging, and there's timing and stuff. And all of that stuff combined to make the experience of playing Tunic over Xbox's game streaming just immediately, obviously, apparently bad. It was like a really terrible experience. I was like, I wrote it off. I thought, I'm never doing that again. It sucked. But just out of necessity, I tried it with this game and it was fantastic. This is a game like it's a perfect scenario for it. Like it doesn't require like Twitch anything. It's think and read game, and most of the time things on screen are standing pretty still.
And with the big head mode.
With the big head mode. So I played this, and I kept switching devices. It was fantastic. I switched, I played some on my Steam Deck. I played some on my iPad. I played some on my Mac in a Chrome tab during work. Don't tell my bosses. I played on my Xbox and synced my save between all of them, and it was a really, really nice experience. And it made me reconsider. This is a game that has made me reconsider a lot about Game Pass. But like I was always sort of like, wow, Game Pass is a good deal, but like I'm much more pro on some of these other fringe benefits of it now. Like this was really great. So I just wanted to mention that because maybe you're like me and you tried the game streaming thing for something like, I don't know, an FPS or something, and it didn't work for you. Well, like Xbox is starting to have a lot of nice narrative stuff. I would say something like maybe like Citizen Sleeper, also on
Oh
Game
yeah, that
Pass,
would work
and
great
would
for
be
this.
incredible with the game streaming. You could play it on anything, and switch devices and all that. So I think there's a lot of potential for it for that type of game. Give it a try for those sorts of things.
Awesome.
Bit of a sidetrack, but there we are. And while we've got a little bit of time, before we go to spoiler break, why don't we talk? And it is just the two of us, so we've got a little extra time. Laura, what's making you happy this week?
Well, I will save my effusive praise for Glass Onion till more people can watch it. It's on Netflix. But the other thing that I recommended to my family over Thanksgiving that was like just the biggest home run I've ever seen was the Big Brunch on HBO Max. It is a cooking competition show hosted by Dan Levy, Sola, who we've praised on the podcast before, and the guy who runs 11 Madison. So like an actual like restaurateur. Sorry to that man that I forgot your name. You were very good. You're a very good host. The three of them are judges on the show, and it's like stick with it. The first one's going to feel like, oh man, there's a lot of packaged backstory about these chefs coming from, just trying to make their communities better. And like, they've got very touchy-feely backgrounds. It might feel like a lot of overproduction, but this is the funniest cooking show I've ever seen. The hosts are absolutely hysterical. First of all, there is a bartender serving them drinks while the people are cooking. There's just a bartender taking orders. Dan Levy's ordering really elaborate, like Clamato Bloody Marys. Sola is always ordering just whiskey in a glass. Like there's a full bartender. They're drinking. They are eating too much of the food and getting full and making fun of each other for it. Have you ever seen a cooking competition show where the hosts were like absolutely cracking each other up on camera? Like, they're not usually funny. The judges are not funny. In this case, the judges were very, very good. They have a beautiful vibe. Sola is, like, at some point, the 11 Madison guy turns to Sola and goes, so who do you think is the villain of the season? And she goes, I think we're the villains. And it's a show where, like, that is the vibe. We watched, I think, 3 or 4 over Thanksgiving and then had a really long car trip home and watched the rest. And I texted that to my sister-in-law and was like, we watched the best of the Big Brunch when we got home. And she was like, we did too. She's like, I also talked to my mom and she's watched 2 more episodes. So like, everybody just like, it was a thing we put on because everyone could agree on it. And then everyone wanted to finish the season when they got home. So I don't know. Bake Off apparently had a terrible season. This is another really warm cooking show where everyone likes each other and wants each other to do their best.
Where is this streaming again?
This is on HBO Max, of all places.
Okay, well.
Also, like, they're increasingly...
Like, I don't have HBO Max, so I don't really know what their catalog's like, but I wouldn't have expected, like, reality stuff on there.
They have a lot of reality stuff. They have a lot of reality TV that used to air in the UK. Like... The Doghouse, which is a UK show that they put on, or like The Great Pottery Throwdown was on it. They also have, they have F-Boy Island, which is not a warm and fuzzy show at all. And they also have like weird one-off stuff. Like they've got a flower arranging show, and they've got a show where like people like groom dogs. That's not good. So like hit or miss. This had a prize of $300,000. So, like, I guess that's what Dan Levy wanted to do. He's the producer. Definitely has Shit Creeps vibes. Like, I don't know. Someone said, this is a good thing to watch with your family over Thanksgiving. And we were tired. And I was like, let's watch this thing. And I was so glad it was good. My father-in-law did make a joke about like, where's the woke meter at? Because there were so many people with like touching backstories. He's like, I feel like this is a very woke cooking show. And I was like, shush, we're not having this fight over Thanksgiving.
Oh God.
He was making a joke about it. He is a very kind man. But
good. Okay.
Yeah, the antennas were up. We were like, uh-oh. It was like, no, he just, but
Well, that's definitely a recommendation that people might be able to use over their Christmas break.
It is so easy to put on TV with your family. Like,
sometimes you just need them to shut the hell up.
and like having a bunch of chefs judging brunch food while drinking cocktails. Like, what else do you want with your family?
Literally everyone likes to talk about food. That's an absolute truth that I have learned.
And like guessing who's going home is a fun game to play and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's a great recommendation. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
My like recommendation is going to be a bit more techie and maybe a little more special case, but I will preface this by saying that I don't talk about it on this show very much, but like I have certain nerd areas, and one of my persistent nerd interests has been home automation forever, basically since I became a homeowner. I love doing like home automation stuff. I love like, setting up all of my lights on smart switches and, deciding about automation and schedules for them and things like that. And I've generally settled on, because I'm an Apple guy, I've generally settled on like the HomeKit stuff, although I have some Alexas and other stuff. And so I've been, over the last few years, I've had a number of different devices from a brand called Aqara. That's Aqara. Aqara is kind of like it's like a Chinese company, and they're kind of like the cheapest HomeKit stuff seller. So generally you need to buy one of their hubs. Back when I first started with Aqara, they only had one hub, and it's very annoying. It was like a terrible design. You had to plug it into the wall. It didn't have Ethernet. It was just this giant wart that sat on your wall and lit up. And I did not like it. But now they have much better ones. You can buy one that's just like a black puck with an Ethernet that you can stick in your closet or under your shelf or whatever. So that's improved. But Aqara has, I think they're a huge brand in Asia. They have a ton of different stuff. You can get their in-wall smart switches, and they have smart light bulbs, and they have cameras, and they have everything, basically everything you can imagine smart home wise. And almost all of it is HomeKit compatible. But not all, I know it's also, a lot of it's very, very cheap. So for example, like I had a bunch of like Aqara motion sensors, and like similar ones from like more mainstream brands are pretty expensive. And these ones are like $12, like really cheap stuff, and it works great. And I found out that they have a lot of devices. So first of all, I guess I would just recommend Aqara stuff. Like a lot of it's available on Amazon. You can just go on there and search for it. But they also have a lot of devices that you can get if you order them directly from China, that you can't get here for no apparent reason. And I bought 5 of this. I'm going to show Laura, but you guys will have to describe it for you. Actually, I don't have. You're seeing the box, so Laura, that was useless to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, great.
I'll describe it.
Radio, but also it's a box.
It's a box. Aqara has something that they call an Opple. I don't know why.
Apple, like an apple, but
yeah, like Apple, but with an O. It is a very versatile little like wall switch kind of thing that you can like either stick or magnet or screw to a wall, and it has 6 buttons on it.
Okay.
And each button can be tied into something that happens in your smart home via the HomeKit setup, and each button has a single press, a double press, or a press and hold function.
Oh, it's like a fancy remote control that sticks on your wall.
Exactly. And it not only does it stick on your wall, it has a little wall plate, but it's also the actual controller thing magnets into the wall plate. So if there's some reason that you want to take that little controller and walk across the room with it, you can still do that. It's a little wireless device. And they're like $17 or $18 if you buy them directly from Aqara's store on AliExpress.
It's so much cheaper than it would be if it was actually available in the United States.
Right. And so I put these things in every room, and they've been fantastic because like I know I like smart home stuff. And the first thing you think of when you think, oh, I'm going to smart homify my stuff is like, maybe I put lights on a timer, maybe I put a motion sensor. And if I want to control things, otherwise I'll talk into the air to a remote cylinder. I'll talk to Alexa or Siri or whatever. And I do a lot of that. But I'm realizing there's a lot of benefit in having buttons places. People who installed light switches, hundreds of years ago, they had the right idea in some ways. But being able to have something that has 6 buttons on it, and really actually like 18 things you can program it to do, that's awesome because like I have a button that turns on all the lights in this room, turns on all the lights in this room and the adjoining room, turns off all the lights in both of those rooms, dims them halfway. I have the buttons that will turn on and off the Christmas tree, independent of all the other lights in the room, all that kind of stuff. Buttons that'll turn off all the lights in the house. And up in the upstairs, I have buttons on my little box thing that will do things like turn on the TV, the home theater receiver, set it to the Xbox input, dim the lights to 20%, shut off the lights in the next room. Well, you know, like that kind of thing. Like you can program these like very complicated scenes and trigger them with like a button press, and you can put these buttons because they're cheap. You can put them everywhere. And that has been awesome. So I would say, like, I guess the recommendation part of this, first of all, if you're doing a HomeKit setup, take a look at the Aqara stuff. It's really cheap, and it's even cheaper if you order it from China. It comes like on seriously slow boat shipping, but it's very cheap and quality is fine. And specifically, the Opple made me reconsider like the joy of having physical controls and being able to put them exactly where it would be convenient to you is very nice. So it's a bit nerdy, but I would recommend folks check out the Aqara Opple, which you can get on AliExpress for like $17 shipped.
I mean, Rick and we just talked about a medievalist video game.
Nerdy stuff.
We're in nerd mode anyway.
It's a different kind of nerd, though.
We didn't even talk about how nerdy the title is, by the way. Pentiment is such a specialty word.
Actually, we never got to that. What is? I never got around to looking it up. What does the word pentiment mean?
Yeah, so Pentiment is like Pomposette, which is also a book. Another thing. There's a book
that's still not helping.
Oh no. Sorry, that is a book that Jennifer Udden kept talking about, and I was like, "You're saying a word, and I don't know what the word is." It is visual art when like a layer of paint chips off, and there's something underneath. You see?
Oh,
so like it's when a canvas gets reused multiple times.
Okay, that is thematic because the game is definitely about there being sort of layers. There's a lot of stuff in the game about like investigating not just the present mystery, but also investigating the past of the town all the way down through its earlier Roman and pagan histories. And so that's cool. This idea that like, you know, it's an art term. It specifically applies to the kind of art that we'd be talking about here, but also it has that thematic element to it. That's a really good name.
Yeah, I think it's Pentimento with an O at the end, but they probably didn't want it to sound Italian. I don't know if it's, but that's what that word means. It's that like chipped paint, seeing something peeking through. Like also what they do with the text in here, like when they erase and rewrite stuff on top of it, like that's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. Cool. Great thematic title.
Thank you for that, because I meant to see if I could look up that word, but I did a cursory Google search for the word pentiment, and all I got was this game. And so, yeah, thank you. Well, now I guess it's time for us to talk our spoiler break. But before we do that, let's do our quick admin and outro. Where can you find us, these stuff? Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. And you can find our show on Patreon. You can support the show for even just $1 a month, and you'll get immediate access to our Discord. I know everyone's fleeing Twitter. We'll mention the Twitters in a minute. We do still have one. It auto posts. I'm not there really. But if you are fleeing Twitter and you need a good place to hang, our Discord is a pretty good one. You can go to patreon.com/theshortgame and support the show with even just $1 a month, and you'll get instant access to our Discord, which is a good hang to talk about games. You can also find, and if you support at the $5 level, I will send you some stickers. And we would really appreciate that. Let's see. You can find our show on Twitter @_shortgame. Yes, I know Twitter is becoming weirder by the day, but our show is still there. I, on the other hand, am not there anymore, kind of. I have an account, and I will notice if you tag me there @RayganK. But I have moved my posting over to Mastodon, so you can find me there @Raygan, RAYGAN, @bird.rodeo. And Laura, where can people find you?
I am still on Twitter at Laura J. Nash. I was going to go on Hive, but they seem to have a data breach. So, like,
don't use Hive.
Don't-
It's a nightmare.
I know I should go on Mastodon, but I just like haven't gotten around to it. So, and I honestly was kind of taking a Twitter break anyway. But you can still find me there because a lot of people are just tweeting into the void as the asteroid comes towards the server.
It's a weird time for social media. I don't blame you for not jumping both feet into Mastodon. I think it's the best one of the things, but it's not going to replace Twitter for everyone or even for anyone. It's not quite the same thing. It's just another good thing when Twitter is a bad thing.
That said, Twitter made me super happy this week because Catherine Van Aerodonk tweeted about Pentiment and they were absolutely absurd, and she was yelling at people who don't play games to play it, and they were so great. So I'll put it in the show notes, but while Twitter still exists, you should read the Pentiment thread where someone with a literature and media studies double degree is losing their mind.
That is the kind of thing that with Twitter imploding and fracturing and splintering into, scattering to the winds. Twitter was such a strange accident of history that we got such a critical mass of great thinkers and shit posters and athletes and celebrities and weirdos and basically people of every kind and stripe. Such a massive collection all on one platform, a platform that really wasn't well suited to being that kind of thing, but it did its job anyway. And I will miss it. But I think in its current form, it is intolerable to me. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see anything like Twitter again. I think what we're going to need to do is find our own little communities and maybe be on multiples for that kind of thing. You know, if you have academic Twitter might go to one service and, sports Twitter might go to another and so on. And many of them will probably just stay on Twitter, and deal with the fact that it is owned by somebody who is rubbing shoulders with Nazis and making the site weirder and worse in all sorts of complicated ways. So
it's rough. But I am glad I had one, like, if this is the last hurrah, like the Pentiment thread was a nice, like, yes, this is what I liked.
It is a reminder of what we have lost or are losing, I think. Anyway, I'm sorry to be a bummer about that. We are just ending the show, so I'll try to turn this around and say, listeners, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. And here it is, your spoiler break.
So I can only really talk in depth about the first murder, but I think I investigated pretty well given my time, mostly because I completely ignored Lucky. I was just like, I don't want to worry about the stonemason. I couldn't find him.
I couldn't find him either. I didn't do a good job investigating Lucky at all. I talked to him more after the fact.
Yeah, so I only focused on the widow, the nuns, and the prior, the head of the scriptorium. So who would you like to hear about that I know of?
I'll just tell you what I immediately decided. So I got the most evidence on the nun whose name is escaping me at the moment. Matilda. Like, it really seemed like maybe it was her, but I was like, I'm not going to accuse her. Like, if she killed him, I don't know if she did, but if she killed him.
And her boyfriend was like, don't turn her in. And I was like,
Yeah. And she was like, if she did it, she was getting revenge for a terrible wrong done to her by this man. And he probably deserved it. And so, fuck that. I'm not gonna turn her in. And I had the second most evidence on I ended up the abbot. I ended up going against him.
Yeah.
Like turning him in for it.
Did you get him executed?
Yes, I did.
I did too.
Yeah.
And I felt bad because I was pretty sure he was innocent.
I was too. Like, that was the strangest thing about this was like, I
thought all of them were by the time I finished.
I don't think there was a single person in that I was like, sure did it. Or even sure deserved to go to get the rap for it.
The widow didn't care whether she lived or died, but was clearly like, if I didn't think Brother Pierre could have done it, like she couldn't.
I wasn't going to turn her in either. Like,
no, I was not going to turn her sad
wronged.
widow.
Yeah, her whole deal.
Also,
was like,
she clearly didn't do it. She just didn't care if she died.
Yeah,
bummer.
I wasn't going to turn her in for it. That didn't seem right. But the abbot he was the only asshole. So he didn't have the most. I mean, everyone was sort of an asshole. But.
Did you do the like puzzle wheel or the library?
I did the puzzle wheel thing.
Okay,
I think.
Yeah, the code.
Right, it's now been like almost a week since I did that murder, so I'm struggling to recall.
Since you didn't do the murder, you investigated. Raygan is not the murderer, everybody. No.
Yeah, my headcanon on this is that none of those people did it, and we'll just never know who it was.
Yeah,
basically.
I think I know. I have a theory of who did it, but I fear it might be actually, like, if I'm correct, it might actually be a spoiler for later in the game. So I'm hesitant to say it on the podcast, but I want to shoot my shot, but I also don't want to spoil people.
Hit me up after, but we'll leave that out of the episode.
Yeah. I do. There was, if you went down in the crypts, and this was just again, and you pressed a button on one of the statues, like if you took a key out of the Christ statue, it like pushed back and you found a secret passageway into the library.
Yeah.
And then you could not only see the sun and the moon chart, which I didn't need because I was heaven and earth, so I didn't need the element chart. But like that's where you could get that. And if you went to the second floor, you could, like, eventually you got to the top and you got to the nuns and you found out Matilda was missing for the time period.
That's where I got I had the most evidence against her, and it was all of that. I'm pretty sure I fully investigated her.
And then you saw the two monks doing it, which is great. I'm sorry, I thought you didn't do the library, but I just...
No, I totally did the library. I also... I don't know if you're Andreas dallied with a nun, but
I said no, and she got super pissed. Then she yelled that I had taken advantage of her, and the nun's like, "You're an inveterate liar." And she's like, "I'm going to remember this." I was like, "Oh no, this is going to haunt me in Act 2."
I loved her. I think she was a great character. But yeah, she shows back up in Act 2, and she's great.
Yeah,
there's definitely like a lot of branching for this. One of the things I like best about it is because it does have these long time skips. You do see long-term consequences for your decisions, as well as just like this person does or doesn't like you. And also you get like a long view history of the town, like by the third act, events from the first act are already being forgotten by people in the town. And it's a struggle to investigate what happened only 19 years ago, because not everybody can read and write. And, there's other...
and honestly, at the time, there's not enough time. I mean, I managed to find 3 murder weapons.
I think
3 motives.
2. And... yeah, I'm trying to remember what the abbot's murder weapon was.
Did you uncover the grave?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Oh, it was the silver rod.
The silver rod.
The silver rod. That's right.
Had blood on it. The shovel had blood on it, and then there was a broken tool with blood on it. And
I don't think I found the broken tool. I found
the widow's
the shovel
shack. Just notes everywhere too. Just like purple notes.
Everyone got one of those notes. So I'm still at a point where I'm still kind of struggling to find out like the I don't want to spoil anything too badly for you, but the third act is a really big swerve. So something really, really dramatic changes at the end of the second act, and there's a long time skip of like 18 or 19 years. And the third act, you're playing as Magdalene, the young daughter of the Druckers.
Oh, awesome.
And who's then like 19 or 20. And a totally different thing. And at least the amount of it that I've played so far, and I'm pretty well into it, you're investigating an attempted murder, but not an actual murder. And mostly you're using the same investigation mechanics to investigate the history of the town. She's working on a mural illustrating the history of Tansing. And part of that is she has to like go talk to old people and find books and do other stuff using the same investigation mechanics, but just to try to get a better picture of the history of the town, which I think is so cool because like it's turned like the whole game has this sort of theme of like this place is layer upon layer. You know, there's mysteries, but there's also
the like Roman ruins on top of the meadow with the abbey behind it. And then you get a new building in the second act. And
everything's literally on top of Roman ruins. And the Roman ruins are on top of like pagan, folk beliefs and stuff. Like there's a lot of that kind of theme here. And like, so she's trying to kind of uncover the history of the town in this very, very cool way. I think it's really cool.
I mean, even in Act 1, a couple things that come to mind are the day of the flood. The Father Thomas is talking about how you can't repair part of the church foundation because it might affect the dead bodies buried underneath it. Yeah. And the Baron is bringing a book about the town's history that's going to expose probably the saint is a sham. Like all of these things are happening on top of each other. And it's a story told in asides where like 90% of the conversation is about this, and then there's 3 or 4 asides. And if you can pick up enough of those, it creates a storyline, which I really treasure that kind of writing.
Yeah, it's very dense. This is the kind of game that if I had time, I would probably enjoy a second playthrough with different, because I'd be able to focus on different plot lines that I missed details of.
I would find out what happened to Lucky.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure I have much else to share that I think, we are in spoiler territory, but like also this is a mystery game. Like we're talking about some spoiler stuff, but I don't want to like fully lay it all on the table for folks who are potentially going to play it.
Yeah. I think this might be one that maybe when we finish it, we'll do an extra Patreon bonus where we talk about the second act and the murder and the final one.
Yeah, maybe that'd be fun. I just adore this game. And I mean, thanks again, Laura, for giving me the nudge. I was almost not interested in it at first. And I think it was because I was initially confusing it with a couple of other games that have used
medieval imagery, illuminated manuscripts, and they have not been great games.
Procession to Calvary, which is another Gamepass game,
which is silly.
Yeah, and when I first saw
that was Monty Python-y.
That was exactly what I thought. Like I thought, like when I see things drawn in this style, my brain goes to like the old Monty Python bits, the animated paper cut things where they'd have like God farting or whatever. And I don't know. I'm kind of over that style of humor right now. Maybe I guess check back in with me the next time I laugh at a God farting joke or whatever. But something about that just like it didn't appeal to me. But like this isn't that at all, but it's also not hyper serious. It's it's a murder mystery, but it's murder mysteries are fun, and I don't know, it's not what I expected at all.
You didn't expect to holler about Martin Luther?
No, I didn't expect to be like wrapped and in paying deep attention to weird drifter outside the town sharing his thoughts on the nature of transubstantiation or
and
whatever.
Socrates. I loved the Robin-y drifter talking to you about random stuff. It was great.
Yeah. It's really cool. It's a really great window into a world that we don't see depicted in media very often, and the lives of people. And you can also just so clearly tell that this is the game that this director has been wanting to make like since he graduated from whatever master's program in medieval whatever he probably did. It's awesome.
It makes me want to go watch Catherine Called Birdie. So
I saw that. It's really good.
Well, great.
Yeah, it was really cute.
Good.
So yeah, loved it. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. We're going to leave you here. Join us next week for another episode. We don't know what it's about yet, but we're going to be figuring it out soon. And thanks. Bye.
Bye.